Hey everyone, welcome to the Critical Thread. Over the next hour or so, Andrew and I are going to get to dive deep into automotive product lifecycle with Mark Strintz, who is the principal solution architect at Dassault Systems Euro North. Mark leads the Architect Center of Excellence, producing compelling solutions based on the 3D Experience platform attuned with best practices.
So let's start off just by anchoring ourselves in what is the critical thread. Well, essentially for us, everybody's talking about the digital thread, aren't they? I don't care whether you're selling CRM or you're doing a bit of ERP or whatever it is. We believe the digital thread has a pathway from ideation through design, engineering, simulation, manufacturing, and out to the customer. And what is the critical thread? Is essentially what is the most efficient pathway from that idea to the hands of your customer, delivering it, of course, more quickly, more profitably, and the right quality. Mark now has a passion for emerging technology fused with 30 years of experience. He aims to unlock genuinely transformative business value for clients across a range of industries, including automotive, energy and materials, industrial equipment, and high tech.
And Mark happens to be a chartered IT professional with the British Computer Society and holds a variety of certifications. And without further ado,
ready, set, go.
Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great intro. Thank you. And it's great to be here. Great to be on the show.
Yeah, as we did, I guess, have that great intro where we talked a little bit about your professional side, and that resume does sound pretty impressive. But I like to imagine that we have just, let's say, gotten trapped on an elevator with you and say, hey, who are you? So what's your elevator speech that maybe doesn't just talk about, this professional, but includes some more stuff about you as well?
Okay, well, if it's completely off the wall you're after, then I'd say there are, in fact, out there YouTube videos of me singing. Okay, and I think the worst part of that is that I put them up there myself.
Okay, can't be a bit of self-promotion.
Well, actually, in some ways, actually, you introduced me as the principal architect for Dassault Euro North, which is what I am. But actually, I love talking about our solutions. I love expounding on what we do, and I'm quite happy to tap dance on your show to explain how this relates to the digital thread and how it all fits together.
Is that more karaoke, or is there some real talent in there somewhere?
I don't think so. I think no. It's well, I'll let you go and discover for yourself. All I would say is I got 300 views, and I thought that was really good. And then one of my daughters had a video put up of her playing a tuba, and she got 20,000. And so
Jeez,
I'm just not in her league.
Family.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So is that why you have that space behind you so you can go behind the glass door and do some tap dancing?
I don't think so. No, in fact, out there. Well, this is our new offices in Warwick.
Looks like Warwick, yeah.
Yeah, and so we do have some great facilities here that we're just making use of. Of course, this is one of the meeting rooms that I'm using now. It's a great location. And a bit of back to the future for many of us who formerly worked at IBM, and this used to be the IBM building, believe it or not.
That's right. Is it the all white one? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's in
Warwick,
of course. We used to be based in Ridley Court in Coventry as the UK headquarters, but now here we are in Warwick.
There you go. Good. So today, Mark, it's all about the digital critical thread in the automotive industry. Let's kick things off. How does the concept phase of the product lifecycle digital thread contribute to the development of innovative vehicle designs and features? And can you provide some kind of examples of how this digital thread, critical thread, enhances the concept ideation?
Yeah, I the first thing to start with is concept even part of the critical thread? And I'd say an emphatic yes, absolutely.
Great. Me too.
Absolutely it is. There's a slide, actually. I don't know if you've got the slide that you could just bring up there, which I think is useful just to think around what's going on as part of this sort of concept phase. Because I don't know, maybe it conjures up a view of people working in studios with swatches of fabric and clay models and things like that. But actually, and that is part of it. That is part of it. But it goes far deeper than that in terms of implementing solutions that make a difference to the bottom line and can radically transform the products that we produce. And we first think about this empathize. So what is it that we want to create, but based on what our customers' wants and needs are? How do we find that out? Well, often a wealth of information, wealth of source of data that can contribute to that thinking is already in the company. It's already there. But by integrating and connecting that, we can see how products are operating in service. We can see what the challenges are with what customers are saying on social media and things like that. And by linking in all of these things to our thinking around empathizing on the product, we can start to build products that maybe are ones that we haven't thought of previously or in new ways. I'm hearing things like there's an astonishing amount of automotive growth coming from innovation in areas such as digital services and the like. And so understanding what we need and what our customers need in that space and using it to drive our thinking and concept in the very earliest stages is something that really can make a difference.
Yeah. So you just talked about how there's a lot of new innovation and stuff happening in the automotive industry and new ways of thinking. But when we look out, we know that everything is somewhat built upon the past. There's cars look like cars, and I guess with the exception of some things coming out of Tesla, most of them still look like the traditional kind of car that we think about. So how do you see the technology and the traceability maybe keeping us either trapped in the past or on ways of using that to be innovative?
I think there's a balance to be struck here. So most vehicles that are created usually are based on some kind of donor pattern from previous vehicles. And a lot of that's about making good reuse of the things that we don't need to re-engineer, that we don't need to change. And having that solid base can often then give us the opportunity to then imagine a future with maybe slightly different solutions. So actually, in some ways, I see that as actually being advantageous to relieve some of that burden and open up the opportunity. But actually, there's ways where we can, with, for instance, system modeling techniques, take that a step further to allow more rapid ideation through from that initial concept through to when we get that on the car. I mean, think about some of the things you see about automotive CEOs. I won't say which one in particular, but he can go from an idea being ventured on X and that appearing in a vehicle in a matter of, I would say, weeks, months, or whatever, but a very, very short space of time. It's not the next vehicle program. It's not the next cycle. It's now. And so having the digital thread allowing us to connect those new ideas into the ongoing development and design process, even while they're in train, gives us a competitive advantage.
With all this technology and like what you're talking about here, are there pitfalls that people can fall into by relying on technology? And I guess how can we make sure to not fall into those?
I think that the biggest pitfall I've seen is where companies have been paralyzed by a set of capabilities that are integrated in a way that makes it very difficult to change. So when you pull one bit of spaghetti, the rest of the spaghetti can be a bit of an issue. And I guess I'm talking at more a technical level here, but actually, from a Dassault perspective, you'd expect me to say one of the advantages of having a platform like the 3D Experience platform for delivering our capabilities is that this platform is evolving and growing all the time. And that gives us a way of enabling change, adding new bits in, or indeed changing and swapping some bits out for different methods and techniques based on a stable end-to-end platform that supports the full spectrum critical thread. So that may be one area. There may be others as well, but that may be one area where I pick out where I've
Yeah,
seen
I never forget going to a consumer electronics show where one of our customers there, which was, and I'll say it, Canoe, an electric vehicle startup that done very well. They, it started with 4 guys in a Starbucks, and now there's over 1,000. And I never forget they had their vehicle down there, and all of the legacy automotive guys were around, and they were all kind of laughing. They were saying, what's this all about? That's like a box on wheels. And never forget saying to these guys, well, that thing you're laughing at was designed, engineered, manufactured in the space of about 18 to 20 months on the platform, the 3D Experience platform, at which point they stopped laughing and all started taking photos. Started sending them to the head office saying, hold on a minute, we need to change our 3-4 year cycle. So I tend to feel the pitfalls, or a lot of it, are built in design mindsets, which have been built over decades of powertrains, et cetera, reuse, rather than starting over perhaps with this new technology that's coming in. I don't know. That's just an immediate thought I have.
It's an interesting thread, because where I see the kind of thing that you're talking about there is when we have startups like Canoe. Actually goes cross industry, but in automotive, there's some real disruptors at play there, and by providing a cloud platform for them to work off, they're up and running straight away. They haven't got the lead time to get an enterprise class system of the likes of the 3D Experience up and running, and because they're then not falling over themselves to try and bend the product to meet some practice that they've been doing in the company that goes back decades, and no one really understands why it's done that way in the first place. They are able to adapt the platform very, very swiftly to ways of working that allow them to get to that crucial result in the swiftest possible time with least amount of faff, and also have the power of expanding on that when they need greater scale, greater complexity, and greater capability to be built into the solution.
Yeah, and I think it was that kind of startup mentality. There was a lack of silos. There was a complete cohesion. Everybody wouldn't dream about a day where they weren't talking to each other every day. So let me segue on from that into kind of collaboration question for you. So we know in the automotive sector, designs, and with the introduction of what we call ACEs, some call CASE, autonomous connected electric subscription vehicles, are getting more and more complex. There's more regulatory compliance. There's rapid technology advancement, cost challenges of even electric vehicles, etc. So collaboration amongst various teams such as design, engineering, and marketing is crucial in this concept phase. How does the digital thread actually facilitate effective communication and coordination among these teams, especially when they may be distributed across, all around the world potentially?
So I think there's two ends to that question, two bookends to that question. And I'd start off with the even simpler. So the point you make is around the complexity and the disruptive technology that's entering the automotive space. I just start off with simple questions like, do people actually know what's going on? We've got a distributed team in locations in different suppliers and partners throughout the world. Do we even know when the program officially starts? And just at that basic level of program management and keeping people in sync with what's changing, because often the truth is they do know when it starts, they just don't know when it's been delayed 2 weeks, when that kind of things happen. And that goes right from, I'm probably being a little bit funny about one particular thing there, but you think about the complexities of engineering change when that really starts to hit home once you've gone through a few virtual series, and keeping people in step with that change and understanding those things. It's not just about the change itself, it's about the change and how it impacts on everything else. So I might have a change to do with an engineering item, a part, and that might relate to a problem that was raised because of a simulation. And that might then lead to a change in program timing, or it might need additional tasks to be performed. And having the traceability of all of that and how they're all connected, these complex relationships between what might seem to be disparate things, is incredibly powerful, because now I know that if I can see I can pick the thread up at any one of those points and see exactly what's going on. That's maybe one bookend to this, which is it's actually possible by joining things together in sensible ways on a platform that supports that and allows you to see those relationships and navigate them. That bit there. The complex end of the spectrum that you referred to in the question around, so okay, how do I deal with all these systems? How do I deal with the regulation that's going to require me to prove my design and traceability and the testing that I've done on all of this lot? And that's maybe where we come into sort of breaking down from a system of systems all the way down, having the traceability sort of top to bottom to the end mechanical, electrical, software elements of the design. And so having that breakdown, that sort of model-based approach to the integration of the vehicle, understanding the interfaces, understanding that systems view, and being able to break it down to the very simple deliverable items at the bottom of the pile, the parts and the software and the electrical elements of this allows you to control that complexity and manage it at the right level at the right time in the project and product evolution for the vehicle.
One thing you mentioned there a few times was about talking about change happening. And in your experience with working with automotive companies, are you finding that people sometimes stuck in their ways, change is hard to happen? Or what are the solutions that you're using to help get folks to accept the change and make sure that this change is something that is beneficial to the whole process?
I think change happens, okay? I think the real problem with change is when it happens. So there's during the evolution and the design of the product, and we know that things are going to happen there, and it's rapid change and things like that. But once we start to get our tooling, once we start to move into that manufacturing world, that's when change gets expensive. That's when change can cause delays to launch times, and that's when that really needs to be manageable. And so there's many ways of tackling that, but one of the ways of addressing that is actually making sure that the product definition is right in the first place. It's getting that time up front in terms of the product definition and spending more time. There's a beautiful graph, which I haven't provided in the slide deck. I'm sorry about that. But there's a beautiful graph about if you spend less time on that requirements and system modeling, okay, so you get through into the design quicker, but actually your manufacturing times are extended, and actually your design times are extended too, because of having to manage that. Because even, and this is my personal experience, when I've modeled things and use system modeling techniques on stuff, where it absolutely pays for itself time and time again is when you need to change something, because you're able to go into that model to decant what it is that you're expecting to change, to see the full traceability of that, to all the things that it's going to impact, and then to put in place something that is easy to explain to people about. So we're going to change this, and it does mean that we're going to have to change this and this as well, because you can see those things are affected. And now we can do that in a smart way that gets us to that change in the quickest way possible. So kind of answering your question, the best way to manage change is not to have the change in the first place, by putting that time up front as part of the systems modeling of the solution. And secondly, when you do hit that change, to have that system model available so you can make that change in the most efficient way possible.
So it sounds like you're saying that by understanding that change is going to happen and keeping that as part of the digital thread process that you're using, you're able to help everybody understand change is going to happen. Let's make sure it happens when it happens correctly and efficiently, and really taking advantage of a real-time digital thread.
Yeah, it's certainly going to happen at all stages. So I'm waiting for the program that announces they're going to be there's zero change after pens down on the design, because there is, even if you do great design for manufacture, there's still going to be things that come up during the manufacturing realization and the spin up of the plant and everything that happens as part of getting ready for job one. But if you've got that full traceability, even someone on the line identifying a problem with something and pinning it against the actual item that has full traceability right back to the engineering definition, which has full traceability back to the requirements that originally specified it and any of the system modeling that went around it. Now, just by doing that pin, this guy's kind of almost done your analysis for you already in terms of laying out all the things that we need to think about as to what is it that's really behind this issue. What is it that we need to consider to address the issue that's being raised?
I think the main thing is change is a constant, as they say. I'm sure there's a good old saying along those lines. I think what we're trying to avoid is surprises. That's the main thing for me. I think change is inevitable, especially when we're in this world now where everything's getting personalized. I think it's just knowing how we can personalize for the consumer, for the customer, that is manageable, that is a configuration, not necessarily an entire re-engineered process that or product that needs to go out there. So during this concept phase, which I think we even said earlier, it can involve claim models, especially in automotive design, numerous decisions being made, such as lighting, user experiences, sustainability, interior design, all of this going in there. And they can all have long-lasting impacts. How does the digital thread help in maintaining this comprehensive record of these decisions and the rationale behind them?
So you hit on sustainability as part of that list that you just rolled out there. And that is probably the one for me that just runs right through the heart of all of this. If we want to produce sustainable vehicles, if we want to improve our time and time again on that sustainability, it's not good enough just to say we've got some broad targets based on some high ideals. It needs to get right down into the parts. It needs to get right down into the product. And the way we do that is by having sustainability as a strategy, but also then decomposed into individual targets and all the commodity definition for everything that's going to be on that vehicle. And so to do that, I need that full vehicle definition. And I need to be able to take those high ideals of where we want to go with sustainability for our automotive products, and I need to be able to apply that to that definition along the life cycle of the development of that vehicle. So these things that start off being pretty high level might go right the way down to the weight of individual components or the materials used in individual components when we get down into the detailed design. So something like sustainability is not like a one-shot, yeah, we're sustainable because we've got these goals. Yeah, we're sustainable because we're able to set these targets and we're able to track that all the way through the development of the vehicle so that we know we're hitting those targets, so that we know that we're making better products for a better world.
Brian and I were in a show a couple of weeks back where we were talking about the application of fungus in automotive design and manufacturing now. Seriously, was it Toyota or Honda? I forget.
I think it was Kia. Kia was adding fungus.
Kia.
Yeah.
So the Koreans have done it. Yeah, I mean, mind you, fungus, they get it. I mean, they're into all that cabbage going strange as well. So there we go.
Awesome.
As you were talking about some of the, I guess, history of where things came from, it reminded me, I'm sure you've all heard the story of how the size of the rocket engines that we were sending to space were limited by the original size of Roman roads. You know, if you haven't heard that, then you can Google it. But what sort of things, and doing history reviews with these automotive companies that you're working with, what sort of things have you found that you can talk about of how a way things have been done in the past doesn't actually make sense, and you've made really good improvements because of this?
I think a lot of the time it's organizational inertia, and it may be very close to a point that Andrew made a moment ago about the things that maybe hold companies back and things like that. But organizations often have a certain way of working. So, for instance, just at a classic level, we might be organized by a vehicle line or a particular product that we've got, whereas actually maybe it'd be more efficient to organize across the enterprise and have a full end-to-end view of everything we've got. And some of the thinking about why you might have had things at a sort of product line level in the past may be driven by the amount of information one person or one small group of people can consume. But actually having the capabilities in the platform that allow us to work with really vast quantities of data and to be able to work at this at a much higher level, open up bigger and better organizational opportunities, which means that the organizations themselves need to change in order to align with those opportunities. I think sometimes that inertia in the organization can be a little bit tricky to overcome.
Yeah, I do feel that, with the new technology coming into automotive, we're still missing an opportunity to radically change things. But I think we also have to be sympathetic that we, the consumer, isn't always ready to make that big leap into something weird looking, like a
Yeah.
cyber truck from Tesla, et cetera, which is undoubtedly weird, and you either love it or you hate it, don't you? But I think that being said, the automotive industry is one of the most radical things to ever arrive, given that everybody, if you gave them the choice, as the old saying goes, give me a faster horse,
Yes.
don't give me an automobile. So it really should be leading the way. So given that design needs to balance aesthetics, performance, and safety, how does the digital thread help in integrating design considerations and the engineering analysis to ensure that the final vehicle design meets these multifaceted requirements?
So I guess we're getting into classic System V discussion here about making sure that what we set out to do is what we end up with in practice. And I guess you could take a view, I set some requirements, I test it, job done. And I don't think it is that at all. I think it runs much deeper than that, because there's so much different sources of information that need to be used in order to make the right kind of decisions about the development of the product and the direction of the product. And so, yes, absolutely. I'm not saying that we don't do System V. I'm just saying that that's just one weapon in the arsenal of the development that's necessary in order to bring those things to bear. Just being able to boil down some of that information in a way that is consumable and can be presented out when we're dealing with masses of information, and be able to navigate the relationships between that data as well. Perhaps I'll try and explain what I'm talking about here. I guess I'm really trying to say the difference here in terms of being able to find that information in a way that makes sense and not is being able to work with the relationships that exist in that data that help you understand what to find when you're looking for it. If I look from a requirement and it's just telling me that I've got this test, that's great. But what I really want to know is, so what's the breakdown of that requirement? How does that get me into which interfaces am I working with? And for those interfaces, what are the technical specifications that are important for those interfaces that get me down into what designs have been realizing that specification, and from that, what are the options that we've got in terms of maybe different suppliers and different people that can provide me with things that maybe I want to consider things like a more sustainable material. So being able to navigate right the way through from requirements all the way down into our actual realization of that requirement as to what's appearing on the vehicle, and being able to see what's around it helps me to make better decisions and to design better products that meet our aspirations.
With all of these decisions you're making based off the requirements, pretty much everything you just talked about, is this something that you see AI coming into play as far as helping to make some of the best decisions for any of these?
AI is probably going to be one of the biggest disruptors of all. I mean, if you think about batteries and electrification and hydrogen and things like that, actually AI, I think, is going to be an absolute massive disruptor. And classically, I'll make a prediction, right? I'll make a prediction. AI is going to disrupt things in ways we haven't even realized yet. By which I mean that it's not just going to be a case of you walk into your car and you start talking to your car. I think maybe in a lot of people's heads, maybe that's what they think, or maybe the car being able to drive itself. No, I think AI is going to be disruptive in terms of the design and development of the car. And there's a couple of hard points that I think help to frame that. So there is this wealth of information. I've been talking about having a platform that has all this wealth of information with all these relationships and everything, and it's too much to consume. But from an AI perspective, it actually provides the ideal framework for pulling out new sources of information. But even that information, when it's pulled out, can be in a very complex, hard to digest form. So also having the ability to take that massive data and present it out in a way which is consumable to someone who's not an expert in vehicle systems, but is useful for them to understand what they're doing in their role. I think those two or the sort of three things together, you've got a hard point of having all that data in a form which is navigable and perhaps can reveal things that you haven't even realized yet, having the AI to take it out, but then also being able to present it out in a way that makes sense to someone to do their job. That's how I see in our territory anyway. I think that AI is going to make some really amazing changes in the way we design and develop things.
Yeah, it's the usual technology. You can't fight it. You're going to lose. I think it's coming. It's how do we work with it that's really important. And we could go on and on. Absolutely. I think one of the things that people fear from an AI perspective, rather than not just that the robots are going to come along and kill us all. I mean, just putting that aside for a moment, I think the fact that the AI is getting hold of your data, it might be doing things with it that concern you. And I think there's no more protective industry sector than automotive. I mean, last week I was in very, very large automotive customer. They took my cell phone. That disappeared. I couldn't take that. There were camera covers going over it, everything, because they really want to protect it. So given the digital thread, how can the digital thread help maintain confidentiality, intellectual property protection as well?
So I totally agree with everything you said there. And suppliers are very concerned about their data. So for instance, the manufacturing process for something can be the intellectual property and the absolute lifeblood of a supplier, and they don't want that getting out there. They need that protected, and so there can be lots of different ways. There's also just things like export controls and other considerations as well to bear in mind as well when you're working with a collaborators from all around the world. So having that in a way that you can secure in a platform that's able to do it is ideal. One of the great things about the 3D Experience platform is that we're able to hold data and sort of segment it in a variety of different ways. So it's not just a one size fits all or anything like that. But one of the ways we can do it, for instance, is have we call them collaborative spaces, but have a pot of data where the information goes, and we can have it segregated by organizations so that suppliers cannot see each other's information, but the OEMs working with those suppliers can see all of the suppliers' information. And so by being able to segregate that data and manage that data effectively means that we can protect that intellectual capital and also manage any export control considerations so that people who haven't got export control licenses to that data, for instance, aren't able to access that data as well, which is another particular consideration with working with some geographies in the world.
With the collaboration you're talking about and having to go cross-discipline, let people see everything with the full context of the design, and I guess also looking at all the history and stuff we've talked about as well, what do you recommend as the best way for automotive companies to collaborate within?
Yeah, okay. So I think there's a rule of thumb that I would absolutely mandate to everyone as the first point to consider. And the first point to consider is keep it simple. Keep it really simple. And you would be surprised at the complex, intricate sets of requirements you can receive in terms of the first sort of inputs into this. We need it secured in this way. We need everybody to have their own team area. We need all of this. No, it needs to be boiled down to the simplest model possible to collaborate across things, and then introduce complexity only as absolutely necessary. Because I think sometimes security can become the enemy of collaboration. And what we want to do is create a collaborative environment that is protected in the right way. And actually, again, the 3D Experience platform, it's possible to set that out. And then as you bring in other partners, it's possible then to kind of close it down and add additional controls in place so that you can work with a more complex complex model. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is the model works best for me anyway, is having a central repository for this information. And it breaks my heart sometimes where we've worked with export controls, export compliance, where we've worked with the departments, all the different suppliers. We've worked out a beautiful, elegant security model for the data that's in the system, and then we take that and dump it in a data lake, which has had none of that consideration, which has none of that control. And like I say, it just breaks my heart sometimes to see when that happens. So the second point is, I think it makes sense to manage that in an environment where you do have that ability to manage and maintain that control for the full breadth of that critical chain. And those would be my two key things that I'd say for people considering how to go about doing collaboration with.
Got it. So let's step it down the digital critical thread. Move it to prototype and testing, which integral to automotive design. How does the digital thread support that kind of iterative process of designing, testing, refining vehicle components, especially when you start to consider not just the physical, but the virtual simulation testing areas as well?
I don't know if you've heard of it, but General Motors have got this program called Vision 2025, I think it is. And with Vision 2025, they're aiming to be completely virtual, no physical prototypes. That's what they're by 2025.
Right. Yes, I couldn't remember the title, 2025, Vision 2025. But yeah, I know they're doing it.
It's ambitious, but it's a realization of that question. What they're saying is, how can we use the digital and critical thread for getting to a point where we can develop our products so that they're right first time? And why are they doing that? Why? Because they think it's a cool thing to do. No, they've got very clear reasons why they're doing that. It's because as General. Sorry, you were going to say?
No, I'm going to say I don't think it's all about being cool with GM. I think they have an ulterior motive. Yeah.
No. Well, I guess they're in a very rapidly changing environment where they're trying to become as nimble, if not nimbler, than their competition. So the first point of that is to try and increase their speed. So they see this as a way of using digital representations to be able to get through those virtual testing cycles to a point where they're trying to do away with physical prototyping. And some of the arguments that they're using there are very, very interesting as well, because they say, well, if we use physical prototypes, we can take it to desert, we can take it to a glacier, we can take it to an urban setting or English countryside roads or something like that, nice bendy roads. In a simulation, you can take it to another planet. You can take it to as many n to the power of n times environments and test that to see how that product is going to perform. And so you effectively end up with a better result than you would have done if you'd have done that physical prototype, which of course takes time as well. So they're looking at that time. They also see this is potentially aiding quality because they're able to try different things, get customer experience and stuff like that into it. And the final point that they make is around variant, being able to try lots of different variants of the product. And I see that as being something, although if you look at, for instance, you want to go and buy a Tesla, there's not much variance in there in terms of the product that you're choosing. I bet you anything that in terms of the variants that they consider as they're leading up to that product and the way that they're managing all those different optionality as it comes through and they introduce it on their product, they're actually dealing with a lot of variance in the engineering, and they have to be very clever at managing that. So again, having that control and being able to manage that in a way to test is that you can not only model it but then also test that is critical.
It sounds like the idea of using a virtual prototype is better overall than using physical prototypes from what you're talking about with, taking it to another planet, for example. Are there any situations where it is actually still better to use a physical prototype instead of a virtual?
Well, so I think it's a laudable aim. I think there will still be physical prototypes going forward. It's like drawings. right? So we don't have drawings anymore, do we? And yet, surprisingly, it's surprising how many places still do drawings. And between suppliers, it's got a lot going for it, I guess. It's simple, easy to transfer. It confers a fair bit of information. But an awful lot is lost with that too. So having a full representation of what you're working on, being able to section it, being able to do what if analysis on it, the kind of thing you just can't do with things like drawings. That's kind of the equivalent in that space. But physical prototypes, again, I think it's likely that they will continue. The first car that rolls off the line, whether you consider that a prototype or your first production model, it's still going to be very different from the 100th car or the 200th car that comes off the product line, and being able to manage that and manage that change as those physical prototypes, capturing the information from that, using the real-time data to augment what we've got as part of our virtual twin. That still has a lot going for it to enable the effective design and development of vehicles.
And it's no matter how much you plan ahead or think you've covered all the factors in your controlled simulation in the virtual, once you let real humans get involved with stuff, testing things out and environments in the real world, there's always something that was not necessarily planned for or expected.
I guess so. I wonder if AI will have a place to play here, where it's varying the. In fact, actually, so we have AI for doing exactly that in Dassault, for doing generative solutions to problems, and then using the AI to pick out of all these vast array of possible solutions of things. Actually, these ones seem to meet the criteria that you're after in the best possible way. So actually, we're already doing this kind of thing with AI to give some prediction and intelligence into that design process. But maybe we will see more of it applied in the physical prototype space as well.
So AI comes with us on this next one. So if moving down the thread, we've done the simulation, the product simulation. Now we're moving into manufacturing simulation. So as the vehicle design progresses to that process planning phase, layouts, etc., how does automotive product lifecycle digital thread assist in translating complex designs into efficient and optimized manufacturing processes? And we know AI can come in there as well. So if you want to go there,
yeah, I could try and throw a bit of that in. But I think first place I go on this is thinking through things like design for manufacture, because we should be designing those manufacturing processes even before we get to well before we get to that manufacturing process. I'm given to think of Body in White, the creation of the body structures for the chassis, not the body, I guess. It's the clues in the name. Of the body, because the way that is typically designed is as a process, because you're putting fixings into panels that join together and then building up those groups of things. But you're doing that in the way that it's going to be manufactured. So having the strong linkage between what you're going to be doing in manufacturing and the processes that surround it, and linking that into the design process, and having that as a virtuous cycle as part of the development process is great. When we get down into manufacture, so we've done all that. It's brilliant. We've got a fantastic product. It's all the manufacturing guys are saying, you engineers, you're brilliant. We love you because it goes together and there's no problems.
Really?
But
really,
yes, I'm waiting for the day. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm going to say. Me too.
But think about what's happened since we originally specified what vehicles were going to come off the end of that production line. Time has elapsed. When we were talking about concept right at the beginning of our talk here, and about all those brilliant ideas about what we want, and time has elapsed, and those ideas have changed. And so there's going to have to be more iterative processes to say, okay, so we've got this change. How is that going to impact the manufacturing process? Maybe the manufacturing processes themselves have changed. It's the other way around. It's, we were going to do this battery with this manufacturing process, but actually, no, it's going to be that battery with that manufacturing process. How do we re-engineer it into the vehicle in a way that we can do that rapidly without affecting our job one date, and in a way that allows us to make the minimum possible cost with the maximum amount of benefit. Having that full model, having it's equivalent of pulling out the blueprints and be able to lay them out there, but having a blueprint for everything with the critical thread, that takes us right back even to the initial requirements. We can challenge some of those that maybe no longer apply. We can look at the modeling of, well, what does this actually impact? It might not be immediately obvious. I'm minded of the 2CV, which the part of the suspension of the 2CV was the seat. So because it had big springs underneath the seat. Yeah, I think actually that's probably true of most cars today. In fact, actually think about it, we still have a certain amount of cushioning in the seat. But the point I'm trying to make is we might be trying to change something that might be a road spring or something like that. But actually that might have impacts into systems that we haven't quite realized. But so having that full traceability back to the way that this impacts everything else in the design allows us to make those changes, understand those changes, and then put together a plan that's gonna get us to the best result in the quickest time.
I think one thing you mentioned there was linking together and the importance of being able to link your EBOM, your MBOM, bill of process, etc. How do you recommend that organizations do that?
So sadly, some organizations try and overload the engineering bill of materials. Things like make buy decisions. I'm trying to think of some other thing. I'm going dry here, but some of the manufacturing elements of this, that alternatives, that kind of thing, and we try and overload that onto the EBOM. And actually, this works best if we manage this as different and discrete items that work in collaboration with each other. So the engineering bill of materials is about the engineering, and it defines the engineering. We're clear, we're crisp on that. The manufacturing bill of materials defines the assembly constructs that form and make up that engineering. We need to link those two things together. I gave a great example of body in white, and that's not the only example in vehicle design where that makes a hell of a lot of sense to understand. So we're doing this, but how does that affect the manufacturing and everything else? And of course, then the bill of process that then sits alongside that. So we built that up. I have seen the jewel that people are looking for ultimately with being able to do this as a complete end-to-end set of traceability that gets us to that, is to be able to vary that. And the variance is any car, any plant. So I'm able to make that change, that transition for things like, okay, we need to move our production from this country to that country, and we need to do it in 6 months because of X, Y, Z. The only way you're able to enact that kind of radical change is if you haven't overloaded your EBOM with that kind of information, so that now you're only dealing with that discrete set of information that relates to the processes that may need to change for that particular plant, that particular setup, and for that optimization. So I see digital and the critical thread builds us a solution where we can develop the most effective solutions to get us into manufacture, but also open up new possibilities for a company that maybe needs to diversify into new markets or for other geopolitical considerations.
The automotive manufacturing involves a multitude of data sources, including CAD, the simulation we talked about, production line data, etc. How can the digital critical thread integrate these hugely diverse data types into a cohesive and accessible information flow for all stakeholders?
Well, personally, I think that all data should be mastered and written in the 3D Experience platform. But sadly, not everyone agrees with me. And there are a lot of sources of information. I mean, even in my wildest dreams, not everything's ever going to be done in the 3D Experience platform. There's just so many different sources, and great sources of information. So it's not just about what's in the platform, but how we integrate into those data sources to make those available. I think we've got a slide that might show us a little bit about what I'm talking about here. So we've got the ability not only to have traceability of things that sit within our platform. So you've probably heard me talking about going from all our requirements right the way through our systems modeling, through functional logical, through to our engineering items and off into manufacturing as well. But we've got the ability to aggregate in other data sources as well. So, and that could be from sources such as Jira, Git. Some examples are on there, or connectors into data that gets managed as documents that the 3D experience can relate to as well. And we sometimes have that for things like regulatory compliance, where we have to output information into documents to be able to put that out. And as well as having that traceability, we've also got enterprise search capabilities and dashboarding capabilities that allows us to augment data from lots of different data sources as well, maybe even into CAD platforms that are not our own, or to data sources that are downstream or upstream. But again, present that in the platform in a way which, while I'm coming to work, I don't want to have to know how to log into 3 or 4 different systems. I don't want to be doing my swivel chair logging into those different systems. I just want to go into my dashboard and I want to put the things down on my dashboard where I want them. And that's going to show me all this information in these other systems that I can then consume to get my job done. So the platform provides that ability not only to aggregate what we've got in the platform itself, but also to external data sources as well.
It sounds like you need to kind of plan these data lakes out in advance, frankly. Otherwise, they're just going to start appearing all over the place, aren't they?
So you know I'm not a fan of data lakes as a concept, and the reason is because I've seen people invest so much time and effort in data lakes, and then I say, so what? And they show some interesting reports. I say, so who's reading them?
Yeah.
And for what reason? And what is it that they're doing? How is it transforming what they do? And yet I can point to examples where we've taken data that maybe on the face of it looks like it's for one purpose, but actually gets repurposed elsewhere. So test is a great example of that, where we were working on testing for just testing validation of requirements. And because that test information was linked into a project plan that was also in the platform, we were then able to show, well, okay, over time, there are completely different plans. What is the rollout of these tests? Where do you have spikes in the testing that you're doing? And what is that putting in terms of stress on, say, the platforms that you need in order to run those tests? Because sometimes that involves some pretty expensive lab equipment to undertake those things. And to get a view of how we can smooth that out for better and more effective testing, which was not what we set out to do in the first place when we were putting that information in the system.
It kind of feels like data lakes are not likely to disappear while there are silos of individuals who think they know better, which probably isn't going to disappear anytime quickly. So maybe there's a good place for artificial intelligence there. So the inevitable data lakes, bring in the AI to be able to pull from them and make use of them, so to speak. Just a thought.
I don't know. So although I say I'm not keen on data lakes for the reasons I've kind of explained, I can see they have their value, and in terms of providing a simple platform for reporting. All I'd say is it just needs thinking through in terms of, so you're going to put X amount of effort in for what is the benefit that you're going to get out, compared to actionable intelligence is what I think is the difference. Having some report that tells me something that's interesting, but I want to be able to act on it, and I want to be able to use the platform to implement that action. I don't want to just know about something. I then want to say, okay, now I know that. What can I do with a platform that allows me to take advantage of that? And that's the difference I think I see between having a sort of data lake mindset on approaching things to having a 3D experience platform approach to how we would tackle that kind of information management.
I think what we've talked about here is how there's a lot of information happening, and sometimes, as you say, you can't figure out what the actionable results are. So just to tie this all together, when we look at the digital thread process integrated into all of this, what is the main way to get this information as something that all stakeholders can actually look at in a usable way?
So what everyone wants is something different. Okay, and if you accept that, then you say, okay, you've got to let people present the data in the way that makes sense to them. So we've got a 3D dashboard which allows us to take different apps from completely different capabilities and to put them and set them out as users wish. So we can set out dashboards that are for a particular role, and we can also allow users to take that and say, actually, you know what, I'd rather have my Microsoft paperclip over here. I'd rather have my bill of materials view over here. I'd rather have a view of the issues that are on the things that I'm clicking on here. I want those issues to appear over there. And so allowing this sort of creative creation of these dashboards that then allow me to create my actionable intelligence is one way of doing it. And the part that enables that is our role-based applications as well. So we have these apps, but they're focused on a certain role. So it's not just show me a bill of materials. It's no, I'm going to focus an app that's based on engineering release manager, which is going to be showing the functions, the capabilities, and the layout just in that app for what an engineering release manager needs to do. If I'm someone who's interested in requirements or regulatory compliance, then maybe I've got different apps and different things that I want to do. If I'm interested in failure mode analysis, I've got apps that are going to help me in those respects too. But it's and we call them roles as well. You know, we think, oh, they're licenses. They're not. They're roles, because what we're doing is we're providing capabilities for someone to do their job. And that role, and being able to take a mix and match of those apps that correspond to those roles and present them out in a dashboard in a way that works for me, is the best way to get to the smartest working practices, accepting that everyone wants something different.
So I've just pulled my can opener out because I want to open up a can of worms for a moment. You know, every time we're talking to our customers on a daily basis, we are uncovering integration into legacy systems, processes, all of which present tremendous challenges for implementing a critical thread. How can automotive companies modernize their IT infrastructure and transition smoothly to a thread approach without disrupting their ongoing operations?
Yeah. So the first thing to agree with you there is integration is hard. It can be made easier. So there are things that facilitate integration between systems, but overall it's difficult. So there's a sad, I'll call it a fad, because we seem to go through phases here of thinking that really what we want is lots of best of breed things all stitched together with integration that make that all possible. And it's not a great way to go about developing your future state. Having said that, okay, so what is our future state? We want to be on critical thread. We want to be on a platform that allows us to embody the full breadth of that critical thread. But maybe at the start, we can't do that, because we can't just say, right, we're just going to take our enterprise and plop. It's now into that environment. So what we can do is we can bring things across and build onto that platform a component at a time. So if I give you some sort of example, you might think, you know what, Dassault sustainability software, absolutely fantastic. I want to do that, but we haven't got our bill of materials in sustainability platform at the moment. But what we can do is we can bring that view of the product structure of the bill of materials into the platform. So using integration techniques to do that. Again, it's hard, but we get it there. And we build in our sustainability. But now once we've done that, there's all sorts of other things we can do, because we start to build out other capabilities in the platform. Once you've landed your data in the 3D Experience platform, you've got your window to build out on the rest of the critical thread. And that's not to say that it's as simple as, right, get the first thing in and that's it, because then it's a case of unpicking that jigsaw piece and say, what's our next part that we come in? And also, when do we switch mastership as well? So when is the right point of switching across that mastership? And you may find that a lot of the core data you get in, first of all, there, and you're building your capabilities around it, and you then build up a critical mass of capability that then allows you to then take that leap of, right, now we're gonna switch our mastership across either in whole or in part to the platform, so that we can actually start using the platform end to end. So that my top tip would be that getting the data, the core data, into your future state platform, and then building out from that data is the key to unlocking the capability that's in your business locked into these silos, and starting to be able to build that out into a future state platform.
when we talk about integration like this, and you've got all the different systems, the customizations the different companies have made to tie their legacy systems, their new systems, what's happening in 3D experience, all of this together, it gets complicated because of figuring out how I integrate from here to here, what's my process. So what do you recommend as a way to, let's say, for a company to minimize that integration footprint? So
it all comes back to principles again. So you start with a principle of out of the box, and it's really important. It's important because it gets you thinking along the lines of, okay, it gets you thinking like a startup, right? That's what it does. It gets you thinking like a startup. And I've got these processes. Yet they're important processes for my business. I can't just let them go. But now I'm going to think like a startup, and I'm going to say, well, how am I going to transform that process to the future? And the best way to do that is by saying, I'm going to adopt the process that exists as it does on the platform. And when inevitably, we talked about there being change, there's always going to be change. There's always going to be a drive for some deviation from that sort of platform view of things. But I think there's some key things to think about when that happens. The first is, what's the real reason behind this? Is it because you're trying to do something that's radically different to everyone else in the world that's also using this? And if so, is it because of some unique quality that your company is bringing to the marketplace? I would say in the vast majority of cases, that is not the case. Or is it because you're looking for some automation of speeding things up because, you have to go through this bit and that bit and that bit, but actually you've in the past developed something that allows you to speed through that process. And so automation opportunities, I actually think, okay, that's something that's maybe different, and it then becomes a return on investment, considering that technical debt that you're going to get into with building that automation against the benefits that that's going to cause. And of course, then there's the opportunity working with Dassault to work those enhancements into the product itself as well as part of enhancement requests. So it may also be that when we identify those kind of things, there is a tactical solution that's only there to get us to the full-time solution in the platform. There's
so I was just going to segue on there. Just take the opportunity. So let's talk. Let's go back to the product just for a moment. The automotive product itself. You've got all of these ever-evolving complexities of technology, integration, software development, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, all of these things going on. How does the digital thread adapt to accommodate these new complexities that are actually coming into the product?
Yeah, so this attempts to describe how that complexity gets managed, because we think of the critical thread. I think mostly when I think of the critical thread anyway, I'm thinking in terms of, going from requirements through to, design and through to manufacturing and through to service and support and all of that sort of time-based end to end. But I think, as you've raised in this question, I think there's this up and down view as well, which is how do we go from that complexity of all these different systems, the mechanical, the electrical, the electronic, software, and how do we roll that up into a view that makes it manageable, and also so that we understand how each of those things affects one another, because absolutely they do. I mean, if you think about it, in the past you would have been able to get into a car with a coat hanger potentially because of the mechanical nature of a car. These days you're going to need some pretty sophisticated electronic wizardry to gain entry to vehicles. So by having that decomposition and that breakdown, and understanding that things don't just exist as parts anymore, they exist as systems, and the vehicle itself is a system of systems, and how we organize that using model-based approaches to manage that complexity at each one of those levels, so we can bring down those requirements, bring down those specifications through down into the actual design itself, and show that full traceability from our high level requirements. I want a car that goes from 0 to 60 in X seconds, through right down to the traction components, the powertrain components, the steering components, the aerodynamic components, and so on and so forth, that all go to make up that aspiration and that design specification.
So when you're talking about all these different domains of mechanical, electrical, software, fluid, everything that's happening. How is the digital thread allowing all of these to coexist?
Well, I guess we've always had mechanical, we've always had electrical, and bringing them together to coexist is so that we can actually see how they relate to each other. So think about the configuration of an electrical harness, for instance, and how many different variants of that typically exist in a vehicle, and then how that then might relate to the weight of the car, how that then might relate to other performance factors of the car. So you might be looking at something like the performance that relating to weight of the vehicle, and you're sort of thinking, well, surely we must be able to get the engine to weigh less, or the body to weigh less, or the interior trim to weigh less, and things like that. But actually, maybe that all forms part of that. Still, that what might have been normally that mechanical view into the electrical design as well, and in terms of different configurations of that design. So the digital thread allows us to drill through that information. So if I start my query on something, so that might be I'm looking at the system for acceleration, and all the different parts of that system that relate to, maybe I've got a problem with acceleration, maybe the acceleration isn't meeting the design criteria, maybe I want to make some different choices than I originally made in the original design because things have changed now, and Elon's brought out another car that goes even faster. So now we need to see, okay, how are we going to approach that in our design? It might be that the answer is in software all along. It's nothing to do with the mechanical. But you're only going to find it if you're following that thread, if you've got that thread laid out for you, and you can trace it down from that initial view of, we need to achieve this, how do we do that, and are able to relate that to the complete design.
I think that the idea of digital thread is relatively new, not new, but relatively new. Are we at the point where a digital thread is basically a requirement to make a car?
I'd perhaps argue, I don't think digital thread is new. I think critical thread's new. Okay, and maybe that's an emphatic yes to your question, in that, so we've always been able to relate items to things together. I mean, PLM systems are there to create those relationships and to build an effective model of a solution. But the difference for me between maybe the way we thought of before as a digital thread of requirements through to product and things like that is about the pace that needs to enable, the change that needs to instill, and the transformation and the ways of working that need to go on in order to compete effectively with game-changing technologies. You mentioned the Canoe car. I'm sure that's just one disruptor in the marketplace, and if anything, it's going to get more disruptive. And perhaps I shouldn't say the larger automotive organizations have got to contend with these new competitors so fast. I can remember being in automotive companies, and it was a variety of ones. So I'm not pinning this on anyone. They thought Tesla was a joke. No one's laughing now.
That raises a great point. Tesla nearly were a joke. Yeah. They nearly were. And I think what they showed the startup world is it's just how hard it is to get it into manufacturing at scale. And that's what the legacy automotives have got. They know how to do that. They've been doing it for years. They learned those methodologies. The startups are just clunking through that process painfully for many of them. So I have some empathy for both sides, so to speak.
I think, well, yes, you're right. And I've heard Elon say that, where he sees a new prototype comes out, and he kind of, that's a nice prototype. Come back when you manufactured a few thousand of them.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk. And you're right. Actually, if you look at the manufacturing techniques and processes that with the major OEMs, they absolutely do have an amazing capability in that space. So what's holding them back, right? What might be holding them back in terms of being able to take that and harness it? And maybe it is this silo approach to the way that these things are historically built, where you take some information, you refine it, you throw it over, it's a series of pots of information that eventually come to the end. You unleash it by building the critical chain into that process, and that's the only way that companies are going to survive. So to answer your question, I think we've been doing digital threads for a little while, but critical threads new, and critical threads difference between the people who are going to be successful coming 2025 to 2030. Absolutely.
And I think, as the good old English saying goes, I rest my case, my lord. I think we're there, are we?
You mentioned regulatory, and the point there was that you don't have to know what all these regulations are to see what's coming down the road. And as the safety criticality of vehicles, so you could say vehicles are pretty safety critical. Really, are they compared to aircraft? I think you're going to find that the safety criticality, because of the autonomous nature of cars, is going to be right up there with aircraft. And as a result, there's going to be a ton of regulation that's going to come down with it, and that's going to drive a need for the full traceability that demonstrates that you have built a safe system. I
really agree, because I think if you look at the amount of negativity around autonomous driving these days, it feels like the very early stages of aircraft, and the amount of spotlight on it. So I think, it's going to be very similar.